Hey everybody, it's Emily from ARG Schooling, and today I'm going to be talking about how to hook reluctant readers. I don't know about you guys, but I have reluctant readers in my house, and it can be a frustrating experience when you are a reader and you love books and you want to share that love with your children and they are just not buying it. I have 4 children. My oldest has always loved books. She's always been a voracious reader. My youngest is starting to get to that point where she's really into reading. My twins, not so much. They have never enjoyed reading, or so they say. So I've worked hard over the years to try to inspire them and hook them into reading, and I'm going to show you the books that I think have helped to get them to a place where they may not love reading, they may not ever become like voracious readers as adults, but I think they're finally at a place now where they've accepted that they do enjoy books. So I'm just going to show you some of what I think would help to inspire reading. I'm not going to talk about picture books because, I've never had an experience with a child who doesn't want to sit and listen to picture books. I think that at that age, they're still pretty malleable and they're still pretty easy to get to sit and listen to a story. It seems to be about when they learn to read and hit the point where they're either going to become a reader on their own or they're not. That's where you got to work hard to make sure that you're giving them the best material. So first, make sure you're giving them books or they will find interesting. You want to make sure that you're following their interests and paying attention to what they like about books. I know I sometimes ask my kids, like, what kind of stories do you like? Or we'll read a book and I'll notice that they're sort of getting bored and I'll note to myself that, okay, this type of book might not be for them. But one of the series that I think is a great way to hook a reader, especially when they're not quite ready for chapter books yet, but they're just there, the Magic Tree House series, because these books are perfect for those kids who are fine with reading on their own as long as they're like Frog and Toad and Amelia Bedelia type books, but they're still intimidated by chapter books. These are interesting stories about children who travel through time and space in their Magic Tree House. It's not great reading, but it does hook readers. These books, all of my kids have read these and they have all enjoyed them and they've all used them as like stepping stones to leap into other material because they get interested in the topics that they read about. Like one of my sons got really into dinosaurs after reading this, and we spent years reading lots and lots of books about dinosaurs. Another son read about the Titanic in one of these, and that turned us on to all kinds of stuff about the Titanic. So these make great starting points for getting kids into reading. I would also highly recommend the Zoe and Sassafras books by Asia Citro. These are fantastic, and I think these are actually better writing than the Magic Tree House books, but it's the same idea. These are very early beginning chapter books, so there's still pictures, there's not a lot of text per page, but they're more in-depth and more interesting stories. And these are about a little girl and her cat, and they do science experiments to help rescue magical creatures that live in the forest behind their house. And they're just really well done, really well written. And these also read aloud really well. So that's a great way to that's another thing. If you are trying to get your child into reading and you don't know if they're going to want to read a certain book and it's a series, read the first book with them and then don't read any more. And if they want more, they have to pick up the next book. So that's another great way to hook a kid into reading, is to start a series with them and then don't read the next book in the series. Once you're into chapter books, and these I've done as read alouds, but my kids have also picked these up on their own. These are books that I think are great getting kids into reading books. And I love Kate DiCamillo. We all know that I adore Kate DiCamillo and her books, and Tale of Despereaux is the book that I attribute my kids getting into reading. Because when my oldest, I want to say, was about 10, maybe 11, she picked this up at the library, came home, sat down on the couch, and literally read the whole book in one sitting and told me, "Mama, this is the best book I've ever read." So of course I had to pick it up immediately after she finished it and find out what was she reading that was so amazing. And I had to agree with her. This is an awesome book. I read it aloud to my boys when they were about 6, and at that point, when they were 6, they were just not into reading. They didn't want to learn to read. They didn't like books. They'd kept pooing all over all my attempts to read to them. And then we read Tale of Despereaux, and they adored it. This is the first time that they ever asked me to keep reading after I finished. And so we read the whole book very quickly. And it holds a special place in my heart. I adore it. It's magical. So this is a great book to get your kids invested in a story. Another book that my son specifically, Riley, really, really, really loved when he was younger is The Tarantula in My Purse and 172 Other Wild Pets by Jean Craighead George. He was really into birds. He's still into birds. And I read this, I think I started this book with him. I let him finish it. We read the first couple stories in this book, and he just dove into it head first and couldn't get enough of this crazy family who had all these wild pets. And then, of course, he wanted to also adopt all the animals. And I had to say no, because I'm not going to let all those creatures in my house. But it's a great book because, one, he told me he didn't like fiction. Okay. So we found a book that wasn't fiction that he just would devour. And so he loved this. And this also kind of led him into reading more fiction because he started to get more into reading. So this is another of those books that I would attribute to hooking a reluctant reader. And of course, I can't say enough about Roald Dahl because his books are magic. I love all of them. But for hooking a reluctant reader, I highly recommend the BFG and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Those are the two, I think, of the books we've read aloud of his that I think do the best for hooking a reluctant reader because they're so ridiculous, and the things that happen in the stories are so hysterically funny and weird, and the language, just the inventive language he uses. Reading it out loud makes kids laugh, and what better way to hook a reader than by making them laugh? So I highly recommend anything by Roald Dahl. What if you have kids who do love reading until they hit about the age of 13? I don't know what it is about the teen years. Even my voracious reader, my 17-year-old, went through the longest ever reading slump about the age of 15, and I think she's just now coming out of it. But it's this weird hormonal thing going on, and it happens to even voracious readers. So what do you do with those kids? You have to find really good books. You have to be stories that a teenager is going to want to read, that they're going to get invested in, that they're going to care about. So I'm just going to share 4 books here that have really helped to hook my teens. First, and I have no idea what this is because I have personally not read it, but all of my teenagers say it's fantastic. One Punch Man is the book that my son, who does not read, he does not like to read, he doesn't like the physical act of reading. He devoured the whole 10-book series. I think there's 10. I want to say there's 10. We own 10. I don't know, there might be more. But he read all 10 of them. All of them. And yeah, they're manga, so they're not like deep reading or anything, but hey, he read books. 10 books this year. So I'm going to say that that's amazing. And I don't know, this is like an anti-hero, superhero story. I don't know enough about it to actually tell you anything except that my teenager read these and it made me happy. So anytime he asks me to buy a book, he asks me to buy him books, and I'm like, yes. So don't discount graphic novels and manga because, hey, they are books, and some of them are extremely well done, so be open-minded to that. Another book that I've read with my kids that really hooked them into story is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I had this on my shelf for me. I was going to read it to myself, and then I kept thinking that my boys are really into video games, and this sounded like something that they would really like. So I decided we would do it as a family read aloud, and it was awesome. We really loved this book. It was a fantastic read. It really hooked my boys. They were really, really, really into this story. Like, they were invested in what happened in this story, which is exciting when you have boys who say they don't like to read. Another book series that my son is actually finishing right now, he's reading the last one in the series right now, and that is The Unwind Dystology by Neal Shusterman. And I only read the first book, and I loved it. And I thought it was super weird and really interesting and just a really crazy, thought-provoking story. And I've been trying to get my kids to read it. My daughter doesn't want to because she feels like it might be too disturbing for her brain. But my son was game, so he picked it up and read the whole book and told me he really liked it. And I said, hey, did you know there's more in the series? And he said, is there really? Now, I asked if he'd want to read them, and he said, yeah, maybe. So I bought the rest of the series, and he is now finishing them up. And he's read all of them in the last, 3 months. So that's high praise. If my son read all of them and says that they're really good, and he keeps trying to get me to finish the series, and I keep saying, I will, I just have to finish all the other books I have to read. So the premise in this book, if you're curious, because I don't think this is as well known as Ready Player One. I feel like that everybody knows that book, but I don't think I hear too many people talk about this series on BookTube. Basically, the premise is that there's been a second civil war in America fought over reproductive rights. And so pro-lifers versus pro-choice. And the compromise they come to is that you can never get an abortion. Those are illegal. However, after the age of 13, you can choose to have your child unwound, which means that you can have their body used for parts, basically. They take apart the body. The child technically doesn't die because all their parts are kept viable for transplant, but they are no more. So it's really disturbing that people do that. They decide that that is a good idea and do it, and the repercussions of what does that mean? How does that work in society? It's such a crazy premise for a book, and I thought it was really well done and really well written, and I highly recommend it to anybody. But my son loved it, so yay. And the last book I want to show you is the book that I think got my son Riley into reading science fiction. And that is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We only read the first one. I have still yet to read all of them. I have them in this handy-dandy beautiful copy that I got at Barnes & Noble, but I haven't read them yet. But we loved the first book. It's still one of my top favorite read-alouds of all time, and I recommend it to everybody. But this is the book that I would say my son decided he really likes science fiction. The son who doesn't like fiction now reads quite a lot of fiction because he really likes science fiction. This is the book that I attribute to getting him hooked on that. And all of my kids enjoyed it. It made for a really fun read aloud. I'm still hoping he'll pick up the rest of the books in the series because he keeps asking me to read them, and I keep saying maybe sometime, I don't know, because I'm hoping he'll pick them up on his own. But yeah, that is the best way, I think, to hook a reader is to start a series. I can't say that enough. Start a series. Get them really interested and then let them go and they'll pick it up on their own. I did that with my oldest when we read Harry Potter. I read her the first 2 books, I think. And after that, I just stopped reading them. And she wanted to know what happened next. So I'm like, well, the books are here if you want to pick it up. And she did. And she read all of them many times since then. So what books do you attribute to hooking a reluctant reader in your house? So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.